Hi, I'm Dave Goldberg, and this is another short video for the Learning Action Teams in Big Beacon. Going to share the short PowerPoint. And today's topic is 4 keys to ineffective change, or how to blow transformative change without really trying. And these 4 points come from about 10 years of noticing effective and ineffective change efforts in change. And it seems as though we have a lot of myths or a lot of misconceptions about how to make big change. And some of our natural inclinations lead us in impractical and ineffective directions. So to recap, we've talked a little bit about the emotional rescue of engineering education, higher education more generally. And I talked a little bit about the surprising journey from iFoundry to the Big Beacon to the whole new engineer and to uncovering the Olin effect at Illinois. And in that lesson, we found the counterintuitive message that the real transformation that we're seeking today in many settings in education and elsewhere is to move from very directive kind of teaching and passive learning to a more engaged kind of learning. We called it an unleashed kind of learning, where trust by someone leads to students having the courage to take initiative, which leads to failure, which leads to success, which leads to authentic learning. And we called this the emotional rescue of education. So the question comes, okay, that all sounds great. How do we do this sort of thing in practice? And I want to talk about these four ways or 4 keys to ineffective change. And Paul Simon says, I guess to stick with our musical theme here, that there are 50 ways to leave your lover. In Big Beacon, we think there are 4 ineffective ways or wrong ways to change. And let's start with the first. The first way that people seem misled about how to make big change is to start with content, curriculum, and pedagogy. And I've done this, you've done this, but we all seem to want to grab a course or some content or some pedagogical parlor tricks and make change there. And that's not necessarily wrong, but if we're looking at big transformation, we need to understand that what we're really dealing with is culture. And Ed Schein talks about culture, and he's got some lovely thinking, lovely storytelling, lovely experiences where he failed to understand organizational culture and got a tune-up as a consultant, as a young professor. But I think one thing that Schein's modeling of culture helps us understand is why starting with content and curriculum and pedagogy gets us small change, not big change. And in Schein's modeling of culture, he talks about 3 levels: artifacts, classrooms, the language we use, textbooks, courses, espoused values, how we talk about what it is that we're doing, and deep assumptions. What we take is so true that we don't even talk about it. It's just the way we do things here. And it's those deep assumptions that basically cause us trouble. Peter Drucker said that culture eats strategy for lunch. And the problem with starting with content, curriculum, and pedagogy is that usually you're dealing at the top level with only artifacts. You might be dealing a little bit with espoused values, but you're certainly not tackling deep assumptions. And so you make those changes, and voila, at the end of the day, you don't really have much because the deep assumptions remain the same. Now, that doesn't mean changing deep assumptions is easy, but it means that if we're really after transformation, we have to understand that we are dealing with culture and that we need to understand what those deep assumptions are. And we need to tell a different story about them. So effective way number 1 is to start with culture. Try to understand it, but try to get underneath the artifacts and take a look, do a cultural assessment and an emotional assessment, and tell a new story about what you're doing. That's really the first step. And if you skip that step, you're likely to end up with minor tweaks to what you're doing, not transformative change. All right, wrong way number 2. And I see this over and over. I tried to do it myself. I failed. If you try this too, you will fail. But we talk about buy-in. Everyone wants buy-in. And in an academic setting, that means that we want to seek consensus, and we want everyone to agree about the right way to do things at the get-go before we do anything. So we form a committee, or we go to an existing curriculum committee and we seek buy-in. And but that doesn't work. And why doesn't that work? Well, we've called academic change, transformative change in academic life, a NIMBY problem, and not in my backyard problem like the siting of a nuclear power plant. So innovation is great, just don't change my course. And then what happens when you get to that point? You say, well, if you vote not to change my course, I'll vote not to change your course. That's called log rolling in political science. And so the log rolling takes place, and not too very much change is made after a lot of talk and a lot of gas is passed, and then but not much is actually done. And so the way you overcome this is to make provisional change in an accelerator and incubator with the committed. So don't seek everyone's agreement. Get people that actually have the same sense that you do about what needs to be done. And go do pilot change. Get pilot permission to do some experiments and seek formal approval afterwards. That's what we did in iFoundry. And so that's actually very interesting, because you're both respecting academic governance and you're permitting innovation both. You're cutting the Gordian knot that usually prevents us from making reasonable change. Okay, a third way to not really succeed is to make big plans. I mean, change the whole shooting match, the whole enchilada, raise lots of money, and then make change. The problem with this is, well, there are a couple of problems. One is that you don't know enough to make a new model of education. So but we do know how to do what we're doing. So if you're going to plan the whole thing without much experimentation, the new thing that you're going to plan is going to be a lot like the old thing, because that's what you know how to do. If you're really looking to do something different, you need to do some experiments. You need to try some things that are quite different. And it might be a sequence of things that are quite different. And there's a whole literature on this. Sarah Sarasvati talks about effectuation. I like this little book, Little Bets by Peter Sims, how breakthrough ideas emerge from small discoveries. And you can make small changes and then expand those. And pretty soon you're doing something pretty interesting. So make little bets until you understand enough to scale. There are going to be surprises ahead. The fourth way that we mess up is to focus on disciplinary content revision. I mean, that's what we know how to do, and that's what we think actually is really important. So focus on the technical content. Spend all your time in trying to figure out the optimal way to teach calculus or mechanics or circuits or what have you, and don't think too much about all that soft stuff. But here's the problem: that the soft stuff is really the royal road to change, both at a meta level and in the content level. It's in many ways the skills that employers say they wish that our students had are the soft skills, and really the skills that are missing in our faculty to help be the kind of change agents and kinds of leaders and coaches that we now need are these skills as well. So we think of them, and we hate the term softs. Don't call them soft skills. We call them shift skills, because the shift skills are what we need to make a big shift in a world that's constantly changing. And it's how we shift gears personally to achieve the kind of life and career that we're after ourselves. So, and I'm just going to gesture at this. We'll talk more about shift skills in coming episodes, but human beings receive information, they make sense of it, they act, and then around that is a layer of learning. We call that the being and changing layer. And then around the being and changing layer is a noticing and directing attention layer. where do we direct our intention, and how do we do things with intention? What does it mean to even have intention? And then there's a layer beyond that of alignment and seeking meaning and purpose. How do we align what's inside and outside? How do we align with ourselves and with others? And how does that lead to the making of meaning and finding purpose in our lives? There are lots of skills that go along with this. So this is a kind of a busy slide, but in each of those functions, there are a number of skills, and we're going to spend time here fairly early on the receiving skills, listening and questioning. But the master skill in many ways is noticing and awareness, the reflection and making sense, distinction use, polarity management. Anyways, these things are very important. We don't talk about them very much, but when we focus intention and attention around these things, all of a sudden we have a spidey sense and a deeper ability to be creative and innovative and be effective learners and all kinds of great stuff. We like to think of those core shift skills that we were just talking about as the ones that lead into what we call derivative shift skills. So oftentimes in business, people say, oh, we need good soft skills like sales and conflict management, leadership, entrepreneurship, teamwork. We view all of those as derivative. If you have good core shift skills, then these other derivative shift skills build on top of those, and we make distinctions in sales or distinctions in negotiation or entrepreneurship on top of great personal skills, personal shift skills, and so we kind of integrate these what we call soft skills. One of the problems with soft skills is people say they want them, but they're really not very articulate about what they are. So here we've got this decomposition that we think adds some value and gets us to organize these and also come up with experiences that help convey these in a deep way. And many of these experiences come from the kind of learning that coaches get when they go learn to be executive coaches, a modern phenomenon that's taking over all over. So the effective way here, the way to do this is to train administrators, faculty, and students in these core and derivative shift skills. Use that way of thinking about these things to build capacity, and that naturally leads to better leaders, better learners, better entrepreneurs, and team players. So if these things are of interest, start a change initiative with Big Beacon as your guide to help guide you to safe harbor. We have groups inside of Big Beacon, the Educational Innovators Working Group, the Innovators Across Boundaries, and Students for a Whole New Education. So we welcome students, thought leaders, consultants, educators to come together, form groups, and practice these. Make little bets on initiatives in your own in your own setting, and help take on transformative change in a manner that is more likely to give you the kind of result that you're seeking. So take a minute, jot down your key takeaway, get together, form a learning action team in your organization, and come together with us in Big Beacon. Read A Whole New Engineer, form a book club, read the manifesto, form a learning action team, and contact me to get connected with the growing group. Take care. Bye-bye.